Hi, welcome to the Crafts channel. My name's Corinne Bradd and I'm here today to show you how to make a quick and easy self-lined Japanese bag. Now if you're wondering what a Japanese bag is, it's a little bag like this, and the reason you've got one long handle and one short handle is because you tuck the long handle inside the short one and it makes the closure, and then you can just wear it around your wrist. Another great use for these bags, if you know someone that knits or crochets, and they're always complaining about their balls of wool rolling across the floor, you can just pop your ball of wool in one of these bags, like so, wear it around your wrist, and then as you're crocheting or knitting, you can just pull more yarn from the bag and it stays where it is. It doesn't go rolling off under the sofa, it doesn't get tangled up with another ball. So it's just one of the many handy uses of these little Japanese bags, and they're very simple to make. Well, fairly simple to make, so we'll get started. First of all, you have a template, a pattern template, which you can download from sewmag.co.uk, and you'll see that it's a long handled template and there will be a fold line here for the short handle piece. I'm going to make the bag so it's two coloured, and for each piece you will need a left hand short and a right hand short that's cut with this, and you'll also need the same colours, so this floral print as a left hand long and this geometric print as a left hand right with the longer piece, because when you join the bag together you'll have two colours but they'll be alternate. You also need to then cut a left and a right of your lining and of the long lining, and then what we do, and I'll do it on this short piece first of all, place these two short pieces right sides together. The template that's in the magazine has got the seam allowance included in it. We just pin this, and you do the same for the lining. What you do want to double check with the lining, because I've done this before, if you just open that out, if you make sure that if your lining is that way round, that lining seam needs to go together that way, because you want all your raw seams enclosed. Oh, it's an amazing leaping pincushion there. So you have a short bag side and a short lining side. So we'll go to the machine and we'll just stitch these seams. So take your two pinned bag pieces, and again I use a 5mm seam allowance. Lost my foot pedal, there you go. Go back a couple of stitches to lock it. That's one seam. And do the same with the lining piece. So then if you fold that lining seam to one side and fold that upper seam to the other side, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to pin around this curve just quickly. And I tend to use glass headed pins because they are a lot easier to find. There's nothing worse than if you make somebody an item or a quilt and you've accidentally left a pin in there. Doesn't make a great present. So that's pinned this curve, and this is the curve that's in the centre of the bag, and we'll just check that they're lined up well. Pin the outer curve in the same way, and we're going to sew around these two seams, and we'll take it quite slowly, because if you're not great on a sewing machine, sometimes sewing a curve can be a bit tricky. I tend to judge the edge of the fabric by this part of my foot here, so we'll go in and lock it, and then just very slowly And if at any point you feel that you're not with the curve, you can always stop with the needle in the fabric, just lift the foot a bit and move the fabric manually. This is a nice straight run here. Try and keep the seam flat if you can, it's a better finish. And we're just approaching a curve again, and I'm just going to move the fabric slightly, take that pin out. But if you are going to move the fabric, for goodness sake, remember to keep your needle in the work, because as soon as you lift that pressure foot up, your fabric can slip out from underneath it. So that's one curved seam. We'll do the same on the other side of the bag. And it is easier to sew a curve in short bursts, because then if you're veering off slightly, you've got time to correct it. So there you go, you've got two seams there with a pretty even seam allowance. You can see better on the coloured side of it. So it's not too bad at all. You've got a fairly nice curve. To make sure that curve looks good when you turn it the right way out, you need to just clip in to these curves. Because if you don't, what happens is when you turn it inside out, the fabric that I'm clipping at the minute is too tight, and it will cause it to buckle. You won't get a nice flat finish on it. You don't need to clip it too deep, you don't need to clip it too much, but just enough so that the fabric can ease out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to turn it inside out through the hole. Best way to do this is to pop your thumb in there. Ooh. And pull out these pieces. So what you find is the seams along the edges of your handles are completely enclosed. That's half your lining done already. I'm just going to pin these so you can see what I mean. But what's nice is where you've clipped that curve on the inside, obviously the fabric's been allowed to stretch on the inside now, so you get a nice flat, clean curve on that seam. So let's just do this one, and we'll leave it to flatten itself out a bit. Ideally what you would want to do is, once you've done that seam, is you'd want to press that down. So that's the short handle. Here is the long handle that I did earlier, which is done in exactly the same way. So we'll go back to the overhead camera and I'll show you how you piece the two things together. So now you've got your short side and your long side, or should I say your short handle and your long handle. And we're going to join these pieces along this centre seam here. Now, people would go, oh, you just sew that and sew that. But if you do that, you're going to have all these raw edges on the inside. So what we need to do is open these out, and then I'm going to run a seam from top to bottom that encapsulates the raw edges when the bag is closed. So I'm just going to pin these loosely. So that's one side that will join it, and we'll just do the other side. And the important thing to remember when you're doing this is what you need to line up, even if your pattern pieces, if you've cut them out a bit on the skew, if you can line up the seam there, because that will form one continuous line when the bag is pressed, and it's much nicer if you've got a crisp seam. If you do it slightly on the skew, it's so noticeable. Just pin this and pin this one, and then we'll go to the machine and sew this seam. So again, using that same seam allowance that we've used before. And what I would recommend is that you use a colour of thread that matches your fabric. I'm sewing this in white purely so that you can see the seam that I'm sewing. So that is the seam for the long handle. We'll just do the short handle. And while you're doing this, just check that your handles aren't caught up in the fabric. There's nothing worse than gaily sewing along and then finding you've got to unpick it all because you've caught something up. It's like when you embroider things onto your trouser leg. It's always great fun. And that's that seam. So, I take this back to the cutting mat and I'll show you how you join this together so that all the seams are completely hidden. So you've got your bag, like this. If you lift up and away the outers of the bag and you match up this centre seam from the lining, but what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to leave a gap in the lining because that's how you're going to turn it out. So I would put a pin there so that you can keep the centre seam the same. Why do I come up with these sentences that I can't even say? And we'll pin this here and here. The other thing that's quite important to note is the direction of the way that you pin, because I always tend to pin so that as I'm going through the sewing machine I can pull the pin out. There's nothing worse than suddenly realising you've come up against a pin and you've got no room to pull it out of the work. So that's the lining. Just make sure your handles are tucked out of the way. Make sure this seam here matches up just like you have before. Gives a much neater finish. And the same on the other side. And this is, I mean, when I'm matching up patchwork squares and things like that, that's how I do it. Is tend to just open the seam allowance so you can see what you're doing. And then we will just pin check that seam there, because we're going to stitch all the way around this bag, the outer of the bag, not the lining. Just need to correct myself there. And then we'll go back to the machine, and we're 2 short seams away from finishing. So we've got our pinned seams, and we'll start at the end of the gap in the lining. So I'm just about 5 centimetres away from that centre seam. And although this is a curved seam, it's quite a gentle curve, so you can really get the speed up. Don't forget to take the pins out as you go. There's nothing more surprising than breaking a needle on a pin that you didn't realise was there. And this bag is made completely with straight stitch. I say it's about a 2mm long stitch with an even tension, and you can create this on the simplest of sewing machines. Just got that turned up a bit there. And we're just doing the other half of the lining, and I just need to double check before I go too far that handle, I can just feel, no, that's okay. I could feel the lump of the handle. And when you get to the end of the lining, don't think, oh, I need to join it up where I left off, because you do need to leave this gap for turning. Now, if this was a tighter curve, I would have clipped that curve like I did previously, but it's not. And what I can do is, I've left a big enough gap, I can turn the whole bag inside out through that gap. And then I can fold in, and I'm just going to do these very quickly because really what you would do is you would do this with matching thread. And fold in the raw edges of the gap and just top stitch it. Let's tuck them in there. A little way from the seam. And it's imperative that you do close a gap in the lining, because if you're going to use this as an everyday bag, you're going to end up losing things if you don't sew up the hole in the lining. And then I will show you the magic. So you've sewn up the bottom of your lining, all your seams are beautifully neatly enclosed, and then you just stuff the lining back inside your bag, like this. There are your two handles. What you can do, if you want to keep a neat finish on your handles, is you can top stitch this seam, but to be honest, if you've pressed it, it should be fine. If you do decide to top stitch it, you'll find that's really, really tricky, and I would advise that you virtually turn it like this and run it through your sewing machine that way. If you make a bigger bag, and I mean the template you can enlarge or reduce it to suit your needs, then it's not such a tricky hole aperture to top stitch. It simply threads through there, and you've got a great little pouch that you can just put anything in. You know, if you're just nipping into town and you want to have your phone and your keys and your purse, but you still need both hands free, it's a great bag. Very handy, very simple to make, would make a great gift for anybody. And as I say, you can make them in different sizes, different fabrics, and it's quite nice having it in the two colours of fabric, makes it look a bit special. So I hope you enjoyed that. These are Amy Butler fabrics that we've used here, these are Tilda fabrics, and we hope you join us soon for some more sewing videos. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.